5 international students at UMass Amherst have had their visas revoked and student statuses terminated by the federal government. This as several other colleges and universities across the country are also being affected without much warning. Western Mass News reporter Reagan Lockery joins us live at UMass with more. Reagan.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. According to the university, in all 5 of these cases, the students' eligibility to stay in the U.S. legally has been revoked. Now, I'm told by the university that they were completely blindsided by this, and other universities across the country apparently were as well. A crackdown on foreign students by the Trump administration is alarming college leaders. One of the latest schools to be affected is the University of Massachus, Amherst.
Primarily, I'm concerned about to what extent the state and municipal law enforcement is going to be collaborating with ICE and customs, immigration, stuff like that.
5 international students have had their visas revoked and student statuses terminated by the federal government. UMass, as well as several other colleges across the country, claim they were never notified by the feds. UMass posting a statement on their website that they only became aware as a result of proactive check-ins with immigration and customs.
And some of my friends that are international students are just kind of on edge right now.
Some UMass students we caught up with Monday sharing their reaction after letting the news sink in over the weekend.
It's only Monday. We just got the email on Friday, so it's kind of hard to gauge people's overall reaction. But from what I've heard, from what I've seen, like the conversations I've had with my classmates, people are kind of tense. People are kind of afraid.
The university has said they are actively connecting students with resources as they work with both state and federal officials to protect the UMass community and maintain their status as a global university. However, some students we spoke with Monday would like to see more done by the university.
I would like to see some, more proactive response from the university about exactly what type of systems they're willing to set up in order to protect those students.
Meanwhile, some of the other schools who have seen these unexpected visa terminations include Arizona State, Cornell, North Carolina State, the University of Oregon, the University of Texas, University of Colorado, and more. UMass also giving a heads up to other international students still on campus. The university explaining that the only way that students are informed of visa revocations is via an email notification to the address they originally used to apply for their F1 or other non-immigrant visa. If students worked with an agent or consultant to apply for their visa, it is possible that the agent or consultant's email address was used. The university encourages all students on visas to monitor their email address used for notifications from the Department of State. Now, UMass has what is called the Angel Fund, which is meant to help students that are impacted by changes in federal immigration policies. For a link to that, you can head to our website, westernmassnews.com. Reporting live in Amherst, Reagan Lockery for Western Mass News.